I want to start this afternoon session by repeating the same message, which is change is possible and the time is now. It is time for us to move from the framework to an action plan. It is time to create one Hispanic action plan together. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing today. We've never been so ready. It is possible. I know it is possible, not because I'm a proud Latina, not only because I'm a proud Latina that is totally optimistic. It's because in the 25 years that I've been working at the United Nations, UNICEF, the Global Fund, World Economic Forum, I've seen communities thrive with by far less than what we have. So I know it is possible for us to come together as the community that we are and exercise our power. I moved to America 4.5, almost 5 years ago. And as a marketer, when I started coming to here and understanding about the Hispanic community as a Hispanic myself, it didn't make sense. We are facing a reversed marketing problem. As a marketer, and all of you that work in business, you know that what you have to do is highlight the best attributes of a product and try to put them to the public for them to react and either be engaged as a volunteer, in my case as a marketer for social causes, be engaged as volunteers or donors or actually do change legislation. The packaging of Hispanics is actually trying to hide the best attributes of Hispanics, actually hiding every attribute of Hispanics and presenting us in a way that is completely separate and differentiated to our reality. It doesn't make sense. And this is personal. This is personal to me because now I married an American, actually I married a Chicago boy, so I'm here to stay. So I want to make sure that we fix this because I have kids. And I don't want my kids to make half of the salary only because they are Hispanics. And I don't want my kids to actually be the last in the corner, to be invisible to employers only because they are Hispanics. We have to fix this. And this is fixable. And what we're going to be doing today is actually take action. The same way that I took my action, and mine was to say this is something that can be changed quickly. So I took a sabbatical from my work at the United Nations to focus completely on the Hispanic rebranding, on the Hispanic elevation, if you want. And because it didn't make sense, the three things that I mentioned before that are guiding the principles of what we are doing at We're All Human is what we learned from the Hispanic Sentiment Study. And those are three main things. The first one is the disastrous number of 77% of Hispanics have no idea of their own contributions to the country. That, we will put it down. We will do whatever change we need to do and associations and partnerships we need to do with media corporations and business to make that change. The number two is that 90% of Hispanics feel Hispanics but are not a Hispanic community. So unification is the name of the game. And the last principle that is guiding our strategy moving forward is that 74% of Hispanics have to pretend they're someone they are not in their workplace. And that is a huge problem. And those are the three things that inspired us to take action. And we organized the first summit at the United Nations, actually with 6 to 8 weeks in preparation. So it was a miracle that it came together. We expected 120 people, 150. 350 people showed up. We invited 5 sponsors. 20 came to the table. It is the first time in the United Nations that the United Nations runs out of food. And it was a disaster for those of you that didn't have lunch, so I apologize in advance. But what I learned is that we can come together and create a shared dream. And that was the Vision 2020 that actually Jose Luis was leading. That Vision 2020 taught me that we can get organized and create a shared agenda and drive it. And the community voted. And today, we're going to take those things, those themes that people agreed on at the United Nations, and we're going to nail them down. And we're going to transform that framework into a game plan. Today is the first step in narrowing down those issues and gathering regional leaders to get to the point of, okay, education is important, but what about education? Are we talking about high school retention? Are we talking about early childhood development? What is it, the thing that we all agree is our priority, that we will put our heart and our minds and our money behind it? And what about financial empowerment? And we're going to start narrowing that down. And that is why it was important for me to start in Chicago. After Chicago, we will go to San Francisco, and then we will go to Dallas, and then we will report back at the United Nations. This is the year of unification. Next year, 2020, we will be on the year of the Hispanic participation, because it matters that next year we participate. And we will be going to emerging Hispanic markets that have a political relevance, Georgia, Iowa, but also we will go to Florida, and we will go to California again. In 2021, we want to devote our energy to the Hispanic transformation, because I think that's what it takes. 3 years. In 3 years, I think that we can see a transformation in front of our eyes. And we've been quite busy at the We're All Human Foundation. We've been taking Hispanics to places where they have never been, like the United Nations, like Times Square billboards, like Davos, the World Economic Forum. We're going in a couple of months to Cannes, to the Lions Advertisement Festival. We're going to take Hispanics to the Olympics, because we have to be present everywhere, because there is no way that anyone that wants to do businesses in America can do it without starting eating tacos and learn about Hispanics. We have to do that. We have to educate everyone that we can. But we together, we've been getting organized, Hispanic leadership. We created a first-of-a-kind corporate pledge in America, backed by more than 15 Hispanic organizations that got together and created the Hispanic Promise. We will announce that later. But I am very proud to say that only 3 months after launching the Hispanic Promise, we have close to 50 companies that have signed on to the Promise. What does that tell you? There is a first-of-a-kind Hispanic corporate pledge saying, I promise to my Hispanic talent. More than 50 companies sign it. There is a momentum. It is happening. People are reading their data. They know they cannot do it without us. We are the growth engine. The sleeping giant is waking up in front of every one of our eyes. And we have a lot to do. And I want to start by making sure that you know that we're powerful, but we act weak. And that we're big, but we think small. And that is something that we have to change. So what I hope today is that we can replicate and create a massive mirror where all of you see your beauty and see your size, and stop actually getting an image that is wrong. We have to realize how much power we have in every instance, as consumers, as employers, as employees, as voters. I am determined to put that number of 77% down. And we will do that because we have seen it. You yourselves have seen it in front of your eyes with other communities. The LGBT community, only a couple of years ago, that was not a community, and they were shy and quiet about it. Now, it is actually something that the people are proud, are visible, and probably they want to talk about it because it might mean a promotion in your career. But more than anything, for companies, they are a market now. They became a marketplace. They can create T-shirts with a rainbow. They can put the rainbow in their... That's actually the transformation I'm talking about. We have to see that happening. And they happen in 10 years. We will happen in 3. There we go. We have to bring everybody that we need at the table. People from finance, the creatives, the agencies, the non-for-profits, the media, every one of you can bring someone along, and you know that. Everyone can actually be doing what Maria said, which is like, I'm gonna acquire you, and if you're gonna buy Hispanic, and if you're gonna hire Hispanic, and if you're gonna wear Hispanic, because we can do that. That's the way to start. And the most important barrier that all of us have here is fragmentation. And we have to recognize that it's really taking a toll on us. We have to stop thinking in 26 origins. We have to stop that small thinking of, I am Mexican, I am very different to Colombians, which are very different to Cubans. Actually, Cubans from Miami are very different to Cubans from Chicago, which don't speak to the Cubans of Los Angeles. That fragmentation is taking 50% of your salary. That is why we need to stop focusing on our differences, and we have to start thinking as one, not more 26, just one community. And the issue of identity matters. And we have to address that spot on. We have to actually take time to be discussing the identity of Hispanics. We need to make sure that we understand the diversity of our backgrounds are enriching in our identity, not dividing it. We have different colors, we have different flavors, we have different, ways of living. But that, as a great gastronomy, should be enriching our identity. The richer and more expansive ingredients, the stronger the meals. We have to stop thinking at our differences because we have so many similarities. Look at our values. All of us care about our family. All of us care and admire our mothers. All of us want the best future for our siblings and our community and our friends, and we care, we work hard and we care and we're optimistic. But there's one more thing that unites us. We have suffered together. Because there's none of us here that you can tell me that you never in your life have felt discriminated or rejected or invisible. Regardless of your class in society, all of us Hispanics have felt that we have to try to be accepted. And that, between the values that we have and the suffering that we have endured, that is exactly what we should be focusing on. Not in our differences, but in the things that unite us. And I want to finish this. I want to actually have a lot of conversations about identity. Take a bottle of tequila and go with your friends and start thinking, are we Hispanics or Latinx or Latinos or whatever we are? Have those conversations. Am I Puerto Rican? Am I New Rican or am I Chicano? Am I Texano? All of those conversations are really, really valid. But we have to end them in the same place, which is, I am proud to be Hispanic. I am a proud Hispanic, and I'm going to put my energy in the American dream. And I want to finish with my call to action for all of us today, which is the first one is, take a mirror and look at yourself. Look how powerful and beautiful you are. Stop seeing the things that, are those things that are in the middle of you and the reality. Because we're powerful and we're beautiful and we have to show it to someone else. Take a mirror and show it to someone else. And also we have to bust the bubbles. We have to bust the bubble of being Mexican and being Puerto Rican, which is very different. Bust the bubble because when you're in the bubble, the world seems small and the air feels limited. And that's why if you breathe, it's going to actually be threatening to me. But if you bust the bubble, the air and the oxygen is unlimited. And you realize that there's not only one seat at the table. As a fact, there's no table. There's just a universe full of abundance where we can all fit. And when you bust the bubble, you realize that united, we are strong. If you're inside the bubble, you cannot see that we're all together. And then we should push our agenda together. What we're doing today, the agenda that we're going to be pushing, we should actually just go out and make sure that we fight for the same things and that we fight whatever we come out this year, we should be addressing it and we should be behind it. And the last thing is, for God's sake, go vote because your voice counts and we have to make sure that we're heard and we're represented. So I'm proud actually to start and kick off this afternoon today saying that we are here to find solutions, to showcase the best initiatives that matter, and that we have to do this together. We have to make an engagement with ourselves about understanding the power of the Hispanic community and starting that action plan just now. Thank you so much. We're going to kick off the afternoon with our first panel, the panel of education. So please, panelists, come on stage. And we're going to get going. This is going to be, again, a very fast-paced panel. No introductions, just to the point. And we're going to try to nail down what exactly are the things of education that we want to extract and that we think that we can do. And we're going to be voting again, so take your phones and be ready.
Afternoon, everyone. Trying to find my way. I've got short legs, so give me a second here. All right, and as we said, education is one of the three pivotal pillars that we all agreed upon when we met back in December in New York at the United Nations. So our panel is really going to be focusing on the talent stream between the 13 to 18-year-olds age group, with a focus on mobility from high school to higher education, to graduation, to beyond. So because of that, we frameworked our discussion focusing on high schools to colleges to corporations, and we're going to bring that discussion and all of the riveting information and challenges that we face as well from our illustrious panel now. So going into that, I'm going to tee up the first two questions to Ernesto and Ignacio. And let's talk about what are the existing programs currently helping the U.S. Hispanic Latino students complete school? And with that, what are the factors that make these programs successful?
So my name is Ernesto Matias. ¿Me pueden escuchar? Ernesto, it's teacher voice. Ernesto Matias, I work in Chicago Public Schools. So we have a big push for CTE or vocational programs, as well as the traditional college pushes with our kids. And a lot of our kids, because we have additional programs like the Dreamers fundraisers, like post-secondary coaches in a lot of the high schools, talking to our kids, encouraging our kids to go to college, we're seeing more Latinos go to college than ever before in Chicago Public Schools. And we're expanding a lot of those programs. Like Dr. Jackson had a $32 million expansion of academic programs. 60% of those programs went to Little Village area. So 60% of the kids who are going to experience impact with that are Latino kids in Chicago.
I'm holding two microphones. Hey everybody, Ignacio here. I'm with the City College of Chicago, the president of Harold Washington College. The City College of Chicago currently is serving over 80,000 students, the majority of which are coming from the Chicago Public Schools. We do also serve many kind of reverse transfers, right? So a lot of students that have gone off to a four-year institution, kind of didn't do so well, or kind of needing to repivot their life and are back to the city colleges. One of the programs that we just want to highlight in connection to what we're doing with the Chicago Public Schools is the work around our fellowships, our mentorships, our internships, and then our apprenticeships. I don't have time to talk about all four of them, but I'll talk about the first one and the last one. The first with the fellowship programs is we just received a grant from the Illinois Community College Board to partner with the Chicago Public Schools on fellowships, which is kind of like apprenticeships or internships, but that begin at the junior year level at the high school. We're launching the programs with Mather and Al Raby, and it's focused on law programming. So the students at Mather, for example, 70 students at Mather, mostly Latino students, the majority of the students that we serve at Harold, 46% of our students are Latino students. So the majority of our students within the fellowship programs are interested in law, let's say. So they enter their law courses, pre-law programming, junior, senior year. They're actually my or our paralegal program courses, so that when you graduate high school, you graduate on track to finish the paralegal certificate, and you can enter the field of work right away into the law, in the law space. So we're looking to expand the fellowships from law to creative industries, etc. The other big program is the work that is catching a lot of attention, which is the work with our apprenticeship programs. And those efforts in partnerships with Aon and Walgreens and McDonald's are actually amazing programs. So students are earning $38,000 a year. They are in a job and at the same time coming to the college at night, receiving the education. We then design wraparound services so that the students, who again are mostly minority students, who were at some point just looking at a $12 an hour job, are now earning $38,000 a year, and they're on path to a career within one of these organizations. We've grown that program from 20 to 80. We'll be starting another cohort this fall and are expanding that. And again, the majority of those students are Latino students.
Can I just say one thing about
Sure,
that
absolutely.
particular program that I think is really important? It turns out it's not one $12 an hour job, it's three. And as a result, because they're jumping and trying to put together enough to live on, they really can't concentrate on their studies. So we found that it's the ability to be successful in school as well as having a living wage that really makes that program so powerful.
So you've really outlined, both of you outlined some very great programs that have been successful. So before I pivot to the next question, it's kind of a lead-in, is what factors of those programs, though, have helped those programs to be successful? And then I want to pivot and talk about barriers, though. So any other factors that you can add that help to make these programs successful?
So I'll start and I'll pass the mic to you. So I have two thoughts on barriers. The first is on stigma on community colleges. I think that this is a national trend that we have to all get behind and demystify. There's nothing wrong with attending a community college to find your path to a transfer opportunity or career opportunity. If it wasn't for a community college, I wound up at Central Florida and took courses at Valencia Community College. I probably would have failed and had to do something else. But there's a stigma there within our families, and I would argue within some of our Hispanic communities, where the second I had told my dad that I had to go to a community college, my dad was like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Right? So you're studying at the University of Central Florida. You should be at the University of Central Florida. And so there's this stigma that exists within our communities to say we should celebrate any Hispanic student going to college, whether that's Harvard, Yale, or Harold Washington College right down the street. The celebration should be the same because they're on a path to education success. So that's the first thing that we have to kind of demystify. The second piece that we have to kind of get real about is this skepticism, right? So at the city colleges, you 3.0 or better with the Chicago Public Schools under the Star Scholarship, a great initiative that was started by the mayor. You come to the city colleges for free, right? And so you go into the Latino community, and free is skepticism, right? Oh, ¿qué te van a dar ahí? Eso gratis, what, right? So, right? Yeah, I just came back from Puerto Rico, so I still got my island flavor in me. Anyways, but there's something to be said about this idea of like, well, skepticism a bit that we have to deal with. So how do we come together as communities, as partners, as corporations to destigmatize community colleges and to provide clarity on families that have some sort of skepticism to these efforts that we're all joining in together?
I think that on the education side, you're talking about a growth mindset. You guys admitted when our speaker was speaking about getting overlooked, about experiencing some racism. We have students who are in classes where teachers don't believe in them, don't believe that they're able to succeed. They might speak with an accent, and so you guys know that language, right? When they hear us speak with an accent, they think we're dumb. Well, that's not true. We know double the vocabulary than they do. We all know the positive impact of second languages health-wise as well, right? And so one of our efforts in my department is to try to increase the cultural capacity of our teachers to view as Latino with a second language as an asset. It's not a deficit for us. And so then therefore dual language schools are growing. We have 41 right now, 3 are high schools. But that's one of the things that we have to overcome in public education is the minimal mindsets that some teachers have to include growth. The other one is we don't have a lot of Latino teachers, less than 10% in Chicago, something like 7 or 8%. As a former principal, only 16% of us are principals right now in Chicago, and you're talking about 48% of our student body are Hispanics, right? And then if you're at my level, it's less than 5% of us up there. I am the leading Latino educator in Chicago at this point in time. And so we need to, like the vertical, we need to really increase the capacity of our teachers to become leaders. We need to increase their capacity to look at our kids and say, man, what talent, skills, and abilities do you have? Let me mine for that goal. Let me take it out of you so that you can actually become the great person you've always meant to become. And I think we're seeing that across the board, that if you don't have hope, then our kids are living hopelessly, and that's where gangs and everything else comes in, and we don't live a productive life. Or this is the only job where I'm gonna get, so I'll just take the cash, not realizing, no, you have like mega talent, and we just gotta discover it, nurture it, and get it moving. So those are two obstacles. The fact that you have teachers who don't believe in our talent, skills, and ability to succeed because of whatever their reasons, and the gap in leadership that we need, Latino leaders stepping up to the plate. And a lot of times in CPS, and I'll end with this, when someone's asked to do something, it's, I agree culturally, family first, but we're talking about a greater movement, and we gotta get beyond ourselves to say yes and fix it at home. Because if we continue not to answer the clarion call for leadership, we're going to find ourselves in this situation in the next 50 years, 100 years, even if we become 50, 60, 70% of a population in the United States, still far behind. We need to answer that call.
So I do hear those barriers, those influential factors, stigma, perception, mindset, in addition to already facing an access problem. But now we notice that, as with many trends, colleges for some, colleges is not for everyone. Everybody has different vocations in their life. So I'd like to pivot a bit to Howard and talk about how can technical institutions help bridge the workforce and skills training, workforce development and skills training area.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. We have the same, I think, high-end vocational training organizations, and IIT has about 7,000 students all being technically trained, and about 40% of our student population is first in their family to go to college. So one of the things we've tried to reinforce is those folks stay in the city when they graduate, and so for employers, that's a very attractive idea. Not just recruitment, but also retention is very important. We suffer from the exact same stigma that you talked about with the community colleges. I think that technical training, honestly, I think any kind of vocational training these days is a path to a pretty protected middle-class income, and we have to get rid of people who sort of look down on it. I just had a plumber at my house, and he said he was charging $120 an hour, and I said, my God, my doctor doesn't charge that. And he said, when I was a doctor, I didn't charge that either. So anyway, but one of the things that we're doing, one of the things we're finding is you need to have programs that help people along the path. So we're bringing to Chicago the SMASH program, which is mentorship from 9th grade every year through graduation, and so far, as it's been used in other cities, 100% of those kids make it into college. And so, you want to have that vision, and you want to have a path, and, people don't sort of get on the path by themselves. You have to show them the vision of success, and then I think you have to show them how to get there. So we're pushing it out to the communities. We're in 8 YMCAs where our students are teaching coding, and that program will expand. We've got, obviously, at 1871, we have the Hispanic Incubator, which is now on its 4th or 5th cohort. And one of the things I would say about the support from home that's really important is we do find some of the parents saying that college is too grand an aspiration. And we don't find that in a lot of other areas. And telling your kids that that's too high a goal and they should stay in the family business or in the neighborhood. This is something that's culturally really important, and we've tried to figure out how do you offset that as well.
Thank you. So now we've talked about high school, talked about college, talked about technical institutions, as well as entrepreneurial track. I'm going to pivot a bit here to corporations. So how can corporations address the skills challenges and nurture our workforce opportunities, especially within the underserved student communities? So I'd like to hear from our two colleagues here, one from Microsoft and one from IBM, and get your thoughts. Oh, you need the mic.
That one. Okay. So it's twofold. There's two simultaneous ways to address this. And the first one is, if you look at the economy now, we know that roughly 50% of the jobs that we have coming up are middle-skilled jobs. And we also know that only 40% of the workforce actually are skilled to take those middle-skilled opportunities. So education opportunities as they stand are not always keeping up with the economic needs. So the companies have the opportunity to really work in the education space and really restructure that opportunity and add to that opportunity. And we can do that by coming to the table in public-private partnerships, such as a program like P-TECH. And it's working on the curriculum, making sure that it's really aligned, working in partnership with colleges, with the high school to really do that. It's then also being very present with the students at a high school level. So that's mentorships, that's being part of their lives from day one. That's paid internships, projects, bringing students to the company sites over a continuum of time, not a one-off opportunity. And then it's also the second piece, which is the changing the industry mindset around hiring at the same time. So when these young people graduate with something like a 2-year degree and absolutely breaking that stigma, bringing them on board. And again, that's what we're doing with a program like PTech, where students are having paid internships, graduating in 4 or 5 or 6 years with an associate's degree. They have this opportunity to work at a Fortune 500 company, and nothing breaks the stigma. Nothing breaks the stigma like that in terms of what can a 2-year degree do for you? What kind of trajectory can a 2-year degree put you on? As long as you do also have that industry support and buy-in that's vouching for the degree that you have in hand.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, PTech stands for Pathways in Technology, Early College, High Schools. So really great program. Daniel?
Certainly. So from a Microsoft perspective, we have limited time. So if you want to hear more formal things about our programs, what we do in community to move the needle, go to the Microsoft Philanthropies website, go to our diversity and inclusion page, and you can find out about programs that we support, for example, like code.org and Girls Who Code and Tecnologicas on a global and national level. From a local perspective, we have many initiatives that we do in Chicago. An example of that is the Illinois Science and Technology Council. This afternoon, actually, both IBM and Microsoft are working with about 20 high schools that are presenting at Google with the STEM challenge. So mixed feelings because I wanted to be there, but I wanted to be with you all as well. So there's 2 students, Latinos from high school that I used to graduate from, Foreman High School, from where I graduated from. They're presenting their submission, which is a social impact artificial intelligence chatbot. So those are great programs that we do. So you can learn about those more online or ask me later. But I'd like to pivot the conversation around, well, what can corporations do? But kind of think about, what can Latinos do at corporations to move the needle? So it's a different conversation. We've talked about unity, kind of what we do across the board. That's the resonating theme today. So I heard someone express, the pathways to workforce as the 4 E's. So you need exposure, you need education, you need experience, and then it leads to employment. So exposure events, like the ones I just talked about, what we do are fantastic. They plant a seed, but it's not enough. So if I go to an exposure event around data science, and I'm a high school student, and I'm like, that's fantastic. I will go back to my high school, and what do I do with that? I can go things online, but how can I build on that? So there's another E that goes in between, exposure and education, which is exploration. So if I am thinking about a Latina in the south side of Chicago who is getting 5s in her AP Computer Science course and her AP Stats course, but if neither she or her teacher or her school or her community know that coding and stats are like the core building blocks of a data scientist, and that in a few years she could be making a 6-figure income, she's not going to go to school for that. She's not going to go to IIT to pursue a computer science degree and to go into data science, and she's not going to go to community college as a stepping stone because you can't pursue what you're not aware of. But then you get to education, and you go to great schools and great programs. Another element is there are barriers, for folks to be able to go to school. So also tapping into great community tech organizations. A great one in Chicago, in the south side of Chicago, is Mind in Hand. It's in 70% Latino community. So there's some great work where students in families that are working 2-3 jobs can't get to downtown or things, and you can pursue what you can't explore. So how do you do that? And then those things lead to education, lead to employment. There's something interesting that's said around education disrupting poverty, and it's very true, and I'll see that. I'm evidence of that as well. I went to community college. I came to the country when I was 10, speaking no English. So education definitely disrupts poverty. But the thing that I would say from the perspective of what can we as Latinos in our corporations do is not talk about my network, but talk about our network, because networking disrupts privilege. So if that Latina in the South Side doesn't know anybody that's a data scientist, but I happen to have a friend of mine who's a data scientist in Microsoft in Chicago who happens to be Mexican, I'm just going to have him have a conversation so you can explore that, right? And by the way, if anybody in this room wants to talk to that Mexican data scientist in Chicago, let me know, right? Because it's not my network, it's your network. And so how do we actually leverage our network as a community to be able to guide folks along? What we see that happens at Microsoft throughout many of our global programs is we get connected to individuals to students and youth and talent through our programs, and then somebody says, I'm gonna plant the flag here, and I'm gonna make sure I make a difference in this young man's life and this young woman's life. So how can we do that across corporations, from a Latino perspective, so that we're doing that in a more intentional way to build on top of the great programs that IBM and Microsoft and many others are doing. So something to think through as we're doing that. In Chicago, as an example, having a conversation with Latino leaders and tech companies, so not just Microsoft, but LinkedIn and Facebook and GitHub and Uber, to say, how can we actually embrace talent and do collaborate? So we're not just thinking about our individual and corporate agendas, but transcend those agendas for the betterment of the community. Juntos se puede.
Absolutely. I really like the 4 E's, especially the first one, which is exposure. Anybody can ask me post the panel, but I had an opportunity to be part of 200 Phenomenal Women with Snapchat, and the framework that they outlined to bring awareness and opportunities and just enlightenment to high school students about careers in STEM, because I'm a STEM evangelist, was really, really a great framework, and I would love to share that with anyone post-panel, of course. All right, so our last question is really on, you all have explained each of your individual programs that your organizations represent, put in place, and work to help with education and beyond. But let's talk about what specific outcomes have your respective programs achieved in bridging between high school to college to workforce. So what have been the specific outcomes?
I think for the high school, it starts with preparing our kids for the next level, right? And so something that you may not know for our bilingual kids who become former ELs is that there is no achievement gap. And because there is no achievement gap, you're starting to increase more and more the students who are ready to go to college at a higher level, but are even more proud of the state seal of biliteracy, where kids are getting credit for knowing 2 languages very deeply. Last year we had 1,384 earn that, and a lot of those kids ended up going to college, which meant that they went a little bit better prepared than kids who may not have had to go through that program, or parents who refused the program. And so I think that for us, it's really preparing our kids for the next level of their development, whether it's college or some other field that they want to go into. The deal for me is for them to be successful citizens impacting the lives of others.
Great.
And the city colleges now recognizes the seal of biliteracy, and so we incorporate that in the transfer so that students come to us with the seal, and we recognize that for credit. One of the things we're really proud of is there's this misconception around completion rates within city colleges, and we've seen in the last year an increase in our graduation numbers. I also want to make sure that we get clarification. I can speak to Harold Washington College, right? So of the 13,000 students that we serve annually, almost 70% of those students are transferring to a 4-year institution. That's a big deal for us. So that's gone up about 12 points just in the last few years. And so more students are coming to the city colleges, recognizing the value and affordability of that to be able to go on and transfer so that they can finish a bachelor's degree and begin building wealth. So that's a big victory for us as well as the graduation rates now increasing. The other big victory around the apprenticeships is just celebrating the work. If you're not familiar with the Chicago Apprenticeship Network, you should check out what the group is doing. That's the big corporations with Aon, Accenture, and all the groups that are really behind these efforts for creating and demystifying for employer partners this notion that they should be hiring apprentices and students from the city colleges, right? As opposed to skipping over my students and going right into the DePaul University or something. No offense to DePaul, but there's something to be said about increasing the number of apprenticeships, and to your point earlier, careers that help our students to kind of build wealth early. And this year we're graduating our first cohort, and the majority of those 21 students have received full-time jobs at Aon. And these are 21-year-olds making now over $50,000 a year, wow. And on their track to building wealth from the South.
Now that outcome I love.
Yep.
From our last 3 panelists.
So just quickly, we've been concentrating on the fact that for many, many years, the 2 paths out of underserved communities have been music and athletics, rock and jocks. And today, the rock stars of tomorrow are entrepreneurs. And technology is accessible. Entrepreneurism is sort of something that I think the kids understand. But the big push, and the reason that this is a window that we need to seize on now, is all the athletes and all the musicians want to be entrepreneurs as well. And so when you have that additional sort of validation, this is what provides the motivation. It's really easy to talk about all these paths, but if they're not motivated and excited about it, they're not going to be successful.
So the outcomes from P-Tech, Pathways in Technology, I think it's really a systems shift, because what we're seeing now is we're seeing differences in hiring and differences in student achievement. So, for example, at the end of this summer, we will have had 500 paid interns aged 16 and 17 at IBM. That's huge. That's a policy and a cultural shift within the company in terms of hiring these students who are in high school versus hiring traditional undergrads. You know, our graduation rates for our students with the degree in hand is 4 times the national average, 5 times the national average if you account for low income. We're hiring students full-time at IBM who've graduated, and then from a model perspective, you know, it's gone from 1 school in 2011 to it'll be at 200 schools by the end of this year in 13 US states and in 10 countries. So there's some real student achievement that is propelling that kind of systems change.
And then from a Microsoft perspective, you know, for the sake of brevity, beyond numbers and statistics, 2 names. So Abril Vela was here in Chicago. She went through our TEALS program 10 years ago and got exposed to tech, started exploring it, went off to college and got her education, and now she is in the Chicago Public Schools doing computer science for all, right? So that's a success story of a program. Another name is Roy Moran. Roy Moran is a Latino from the south side of Chicago, went to Kelly High School, then went to UIC, and is now a software engineer for Microsoft in Redmond.
Thank you very much, and thank you, my illustrious panels.
Thank you so much, and this is the time to vote. Financial empowerment, we know, is actually the second priority that we have for our Vision 2020. We know that wealth will take us far. So everybody, and I'm sorry about the panelists here that have not activated their voting devices, but you can actually tell us what you think. Again, responding to the questions, and this is important because we have to nail down what about financial empowerment we care about. A, access to capital. B, financial literacy. C, increasing the size of Hispanic-owned businesses. D, language barriers. Retirement planning. E, home ownership. Reduce students' loan debts. Pay equity. And lender discrimination. I. I'm going to give everybody 10 more seconds to make their votings. This is an important conversation. We're going to take the results of what we're discussing today to the next regional summits and then to the national summit at the United Nations. It is important to hear what Chicago thinks are the priorities for Hispanics to focus on financial empowerment. And here it goes. It is quite clear. This is like a horse race, but when it comes to financial literacy, so for all of you people working on the financial industry, you need to make sure that you understand this area, which is we need to have an easier access to capital, to literacy. We need to know how to do this, and it might come from language, and this is the winner. Financial literacy it is. And with that, I want to introduce the most important announcement that I have today, which is about the Hispanic Promise. I mentioned that earlier, but here's the thing. After all of what we heard today, it is clear that the numbers of Hispanics are growing. This is the future engine of growth for anyone that wants to do businesses in America. We are the promised land. But in order to access that promised land, companies, particularly on an area of unemployment when talent is literally something that everybody will want to go for, they have to make a promise to Hispanics. So in order to access the promise of Hispanics, we have to make the Hispanic Promise. And that is something that 15 organizations together gathered and said, we're gonna launch this. And 3 months after, only 3 months after, we're able to announce that. So I want to introduce to you the Hispanic Promise. There we go. We launched it in Davos. 3 months later, we're announcing it in Chicago. From 3 months later to now, we have more than 50 huge companies that have signed on. Today, we have a half a page today on the Wall Street Journal that they donated to make sure that people know that the Hispanic Promise is something that we can access to. 74% of Hispanics feel that they cannot be themselves at work. Corporate America is reacting. Thank you so much. Please welcome the panel of the Hispanic Promise.
Hello, how are you? You are going to see in your screens the day jobs that these leaders that are with us today have. And it would take me the whole half hour to introduce them with what they do on top of that. So I can share with you that this is the most stellar panel we have had in Chicago with CEOs, not only from Hispanic companies, which is very important, but for mainstream businesses in Chicago. So thank you very much for joining me. It's an honor. So we are going to discuss how corporate America is embracing diversity and the best practices and lessons that leaders from these companies have in how to create an environment that enables a diverse workforce in general, and a Hispanic workforce in particular, to bring their best selves to work. To set up the conversation, I would like just to offer one point of view. When you talk about diversity, some people think first about social responsibility, solidarity, values, even philanthropy. On the other hand, in the next decade, Hispanics will generate between 50 and 90% of the growth of all CPG companies. Imagine that. And yet, as Claudia showed in the video, 76% of Hispanics don't feel like themselves at their workplace. I know that as visionary CEOs, you think different when you hear diversity. And what comes to mind is actually the business case. And it's the realization that if you aspire to build high-performing teams, innovative companies, growing companies, the key to that success is building diverse teams. So my first question to all of you is, what can you share with us on why diversity is important for your company's results and strategies? Please, I will ask you to start, Richard, and we will come this way to Mike.
So the first point is, we started out by having a Hispanic support group. Okay, that's pretty easy, because we had followed the women and then the LGBT and then the African American. Of course, you want to have Hispanic. And then we said, oh, well, of course, and we want to have a Hispanic specialist group, so that we can do Hispanic work. Here's what we've learned. Hispanics don't belong in a specialist group. They belong in the mainstream. Why? The campaign we've just done for HP, invented by a creative who is Hispanic, was we put 100 people in the room. And, there were Anglos and Mexicans and this. And we said, okay, now you self-identify. Whose kids are these? And they all said, well, of course, the tall, white, blonde-haired guy will be married to the tall, white, blonde-haired lady. And they all said, and 75% of them were wrong. And that was an idea from a Hispanic kid who said, I want to show the color of America, and I want to do it for HP printers, and we're going to pick the pictures of the wall of the families of America. And they were all diverse. And that was such a story, and it was such a powerful moment for me to go, wait, I get it. This is the power of putting Hispanics in the front line, not in a room.
That's fantastic. My business is a business of ideas, of strategies, of creativity. And I learned a long time ago when I started the company, I thought I was pretty clever, but I realized I had creative blind spots. And one way to avoid being embarrassed by your client was to actually build yourself a brain trust. A brain trust of people who are different than me, different experiences, different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ideas. That saved my butt and helped me grow a company. Since then, we've actually turned that into a process at Closer Look where no idea, no pitch, no solution, no deliverable goes to a client without going through what we call the pitch board. It's a flight check is what we call it. And the flight check means you put everything on the board and then everybody gathers around and asks questions. Not only the people who worked on the project, but other people can walk in and ask questions. And we've realized that the diversity of questions, when you're open to that diversity of questions, that leads to success. And you could only get that when you've got a diverse team.
First and foremost, thank you, José Luis, Claudia, por invitarme a este panel. Personally, I am Mexican, I'm immigrant, so I'm also diverse, okay? There are different things that we have to do within media. Personally, I can start a media company when I was coming in here, okay? I started Spanish public media because of the need within the community that is extremely diverse, extremely diverse. I mean, you talk about Argentina, you could talk about Colombia. So I decided to start connecting with all the university radio stations throughout Latin America and Caribbean. Then I went to Europe. How diverse is this? And they're giving me Spanish content because we're not for profit. I saw a need within this country that yes, we are English speakers primarily, but we would be falling short if we do not speak Spanish in this country. Why? Because that is going to empower this country. Despite me being an immigrant, I still feel that this country has given me much more than what I expected when I came in through the border as an undocumented immigrant for 13 years. Now, what I see, how is it that we can empower this community and bring it to the forefront is through media. But we have to speak to them in Spanish in order to bring them over. Okay? That's pretty much how I learned. Now, there are several things that I continue to do. Why? Because of the experience that I'm gaining, even though I'm not a media person. My business is janitorial, but that has paved the way for me to be able to do the things that I do. I'm a janitor. I dropped out of high school because I was undocumented. So that same experience has given me the ability to be diverse. How is it that diversity can give us knowledge? That's the key. Diverse people will give us knowledge. Don't be afraid of them. How many of you speak Spanish here? Thank you. That is going to empower the rest of Latin America because you have 6 million people, 600 million people on the other side of the border, all the way to La Patagonia, they speak this language. Therefore, that will give us the economy power within this country. It will give us so much more. So I'm going to just leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Tonis?
In my world, the business case is unequivocal, and I look at it two ways, from the standpoint of building my clients' brands and also from the standpoint of our agency. From the standpoint of building our clients' brands, for me, it's a case that I state again and again because still too few big consumer-facing companies are dedicating sufficient resources to the Latino market. So you want your brands to grow. This is the growing market. This is the younger consumer, which means that they are your future consumer. They are digitally savvy, which means you can reach them, and they have an affinity for brands. So this is something I say a lot. Now I'm looking, Ann Alonso from the Egg Board is here, and Anne's a Latina, and for the Egg Board, it's integrated and deeply understood. But for so many still, even with large budgets, not enough investment going towards that audience.
You have described the perfect market, the
Right?
perfect target.
That's what I think, Jose Luis. But but I think we all just have to keep making this case. The second thing is, from my own organization, it's similar to what Richard said. It's like, as a leading edge creative organization, diversity is literally the formula for our creativity. It's where we get a good portion of our energy. And for us, it has been very simple. The more diverse we've become, the more creative we've become, the more awards we've become, the more successful. So it's been a beautiful thing for us.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, Jose Luis, you started off talking about diversity and diversity inclusion being kind of a good thing to do, potentially. And I think when people talk about it like that, they say, well, then, we want to do that, or that's something we should do. But at least for us, and I think similar to the other panelists here, it's something that we have to do. When we look at the mission for our company, it's creating value for all of our stakeholders. And when we look at the stakeholders, the first would be our clients. And with the clients, there's no doubt that we need to be a diverse company and have diverse client service teams for them. That's an expectation. So, we will serve them better, and we will win more clients to the extent we have diverse teams. Second, with regard to our employees, our employees, not only do they want to work at a diverse place, but they want to work at a place where they feel welcome, that they feel included in what we're doing. So we have to have a diverse and inclusive workplace. As I say, I would like to work at a place where I feel that I'm a part of it, and I'm certain that all the other employees and my partners do as well. Third is the community. If we want to be an active and valuable part of the community and create value for the community, certainly we want to be employing a very diverse work group. And I can assure you, and I'm essentially betting my career and everything on the fact, if you do those three things right, the shareholders will do very well. And that constituency is important, but no more important than the others. And if you just focus on any one of those and get out of balance, that's where it all collapses.
Thank you, Mike. Clearly, all of you care about diversity. Could you share with us one or two things that you are planning to do in your companies to take it to the next level? 1, 2 things next year?
So, Jose Luis, for us, we can't just recruit from the bottom up. It's going to take too long. So I just want to call out Oscar Soros, who has joined our family of companies, the Zeno Group, and we're thrilled to have him because he's worked at the Wall Street Journal. He's been CCO at Wells Fargo. He's also been at Ford, and we're so lucky to have him. We have to make horizontal hires, and we have to, say we believe in this a lot because he'll draw a lot of other young ones along with him. We can't just have Anglos rise people. It has to be Hispanic.
At a closer look, we boil it down to two things: pathways and gateways. Really committing to building and paving pathways for Hispanics to find closer look, find their way to our company, and then broadening the gateways to actually let them feel welcome here. I remember about a year ago, one of my leaders, who's Latino, said to me, Dave, Closer Look has been phenomenal in hiring for cultural fit. We need to become great at hiring for cultural add. That it's not just cultural fit, because that just leads to homogeneity. So when I talk about that with our entire team, for this to work, obviously it has to come top down, but it also has to bubble up, and it has to saturate from the sides too. So the entire company has to embrace this. And I think the way that we've stumbled into naming this or framing this is building a culture of belonging. Because all of us know what it feels like to be left out. All of us have experienced that imposter syndrome, like, what am I doing here? But if we can create a culture of belonging or a culture of psychological safety where everybody can bring their true selves to work, then we're starting to create an inclusive environment.
Thank you.
I agree with you. In our case, at Spanish Public Media, we definitely, it's obvious that within media, and it was talked about before, that within media there is such a need of more folks to become reporters and so on. Well, through this network that I've been able to attach myself to, or ourselves to throughout Latin America and Caribbean. There are opportunities where I can send kids from here that are bilingual to get a master's degree in Argentina or Spain. This is the future that I want to be able to build. Why? Because there is such a need, there's a market for these folks. If I send them from here, these are kids that are already integrated into mainstream society here, that understand the path. How is it that we can then be able to give them a better life? Just think of an intern, okay, that I can send to Spain for a year and come back with a master's degree. That is what we need to do. That is the empowerment. That's the platform that I want to build in order for us to truly bring the news, the talk shows, to folks that are primarily Spanish speakers. And that's me. I'm talking about me, the immigrant. That this is the masses that we're dealing with right now, okay? And there's so much stability within these masses in financial literacy. Personally, when I came here, I didn't have a bank account in Mexico, nor my mom, nor my eight siblings. So how is it that I was able to integrate and to be among you? These are some of the things that we have to showcase out there. We here are the 1% Latino. What is it that we have to do and force ourselves to do to be in front of the masses? Media. Univision, I'm sorry, it's a commercial entity. They only have responsibility to their shareholders. Is that right?
So it seems you are passionate about this, right?
Sir, I lived it.
Thank you so much.
I need to give it back.
Thank you, Robert.
For us, it's three things. One is continuing our commitment to changing the complexion of the agency. We're about a third multicultural, but that means 2/3 is still white. And nothing wrong with that, but I think just staying very focused on that. We have people from 18 different countries, 5 of which from Latin American countries, and I think that is fueling our diversity in a very unique way. Second thing is continuing to attack unconscious bias. You know, we all have it, we carry it around every single day, and even if we're in a diverse environment, if we're not listening and not open to the people who are different from us opinions, we're not going to succeed. And then the third thing that we just did this February, we have a set of values, because I think values is what propels us, the best organizations. We have a set of values, 10 of them, and you know, things like makes the work better, we, not me, hand raiser, not finger pointer. Well, we've added one. And it is, it's 11th, which is different unto itself, not to have 10, but 11th, which is seek different. And I really am excited about this because it says you should be doing that. We should, as an organization, seek different. We should do that on our teams, and we need to all think different. So, something new.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. So, we've been doing over the last several months, a very detailed assessment of the current state of diversity and inclusion at Northern Trust. And it's been led, actually, I would say, partnering between Connie Lindsay, who's the head of our diversity and inclusion, and myself, and the head of our HR. And out of that, you know, we are now in the stage of essentially formulating and implementing that strategy. And there are 4 key components, but I'm only going to mention 2 that I think are big drivers of this. And the first one is accountability. If you were to talk to a manager or leader at Northern Trust, they would be, you know, responsible for a number of different things, but there's a different level of accountability for those. But I could tell you that when it comes to their financial plan, they would tell you they're accountable for that financial plan or their budget, if you will. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, they would say, I'm trying my best on it and I hope for the best to come out of that. That's going to change. And they now are going to be held accountable for it. And just like anything else, though, you can't just hold someone accountable unless you also give them the information, the metrics to track it, and the resources to do that. So that's the other aspect of the accountability. And then the second one I'll mention, which I know others have mentioned, but it's important enough that I repeat it, which is around culture. You know, Northern Trust is a company that has been around for 130 years. It has a very strong, tremendous, positive culture. Having said that, it's clearly not perfect. And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, that's an area of weakness. And so we have work to do on that front. Unconscious bias is part of that. But it's also just the evolution of society and the workplace, et cetera. We've evolved, but we haven't evolved far enough. So there are initiatives that go with that in order to change the culture along with changing things like accountability.
Thank you, Mike. Claudia showed this video where you see that there is this Hispanic Promise inviting CEOs to embrace the Hispanic workforce and consumer. Clearly, you get the meaning of diversity and you are making it real in your companies. What could we do, what this group of Hispanic leaders do to invite, convince, and influence many more CEOs to focus on the diversity issue and embrace, for that sake, the Hispanic Promise?
70%. 70% was the number that I read that said in the next number of years, 70% of our workforce will be Hispanic. That's an incredible number, and then frankly, it's a number that I did not know until I read it as a part of this process. So if you came to me as a CEO, as a business leader, and said, I've got a secret to an audience, to a set of customers that your competition hasn't touched yet, I will be all over that. So I think it needs to be framed as this is an incredible growth opportunity and will give you competitive advantage in the marketplace if you crack the code.
Great.
I guess I would just mention a couple of things. The first thing I would say, and maybe it's just a personal belief, is you start with yourself. And there's nothing more powerful than being a partner employee that is incredibly effective, just overall. A few of my colleagues are in the back here, and I work with them directly. In fact, Juan and I had an issue that we dealt with today, and he was on top of it, nailed it, et cetera. Being that type of partner who's performing that well and then representing that group, nothing can be more powerful. So starting with yourself. Second, I would say to this idea, you mentioned 70%. I would say there's the quantitative and the qualitative. There are very powerful, and I heard a number of statistics that were mentioned here earlier. Numbers are powerful. Facts are powerful, right? So the fact that as part of the assessment we did, we can show on a piece of paper that Hispanics are being promoted at a lower rate than other groups. If you put that in front of me, how can I say that makes sense? Why should it be at a lower? There is no reason, right? So you have certain facts that are compelling, but then the qualitative part is very important as well. So again, we did a lot of work on surveys and interviews and focus groups. That's pretty powerful too. I mean, do you want to be the CEO of a company if somebody said, here's how it feels, this is what it feels like to be black or African American at Northern Trust, okay? And you read that and they don't feel good about that, that's something that is going to persuade you and influence you to try to fix that.
Jose Luis, I would add two other quick ideas. First, I would really like the Hispanic Promise to be something that Hispanic employees recognize as a seal of quality for the company that is signed on. So like the Forest Stewardship Council, when I buy some lumber, I know it's certified. I want the Hispanic Promise to be a mark of distinction. The second is, please make it easier for me to buy Hispanic. My brother John, who's in the audience, is our sustainability guy, and he is deeply interested in buying from African American and Hispanic minority-owned business. Help us to help the entrepreneurs. We will do it. Just give us the list of the people to buy from.
Awesome.
I would love to see an analysis if you looked at companies that had in their executive leadership groups Latinos versus those that that do not, that are pure, you know, in the same way we've done this, we've studied companies that have women represented. I would love to see the data on this because I'm absolutely confident it would add to the business case. Because I think the business case is the single biggest answer, which is you're talking to CEOs, you want to compel them. There is a compelling business case, but there might be data around organizations that have leadership, that where Hispanic leaders are a huge part of the driving force of the company, and I think they would stand out. Somebody ought to do it, right?
Thank you.
For me,
Robert,
it's easy.
something fast.
Diversity equals knowledge. That's it. Because if you do not allow another person that is different than you, religion, color, you are going to be able to learn from that person automatically. I mean, that was my first taught by my mother when I came in through Houston, Texas. It was an African American. I had never seen an African American. So she goes, hey, ven acá. Don't forget that the blood that is running through his veins is the same color as yours. So that taught me to be blind, colorblind, automatically. So I leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jose Luis, can I say
Yes.
one real quick thing?
Yes.
And you and I have talked about this. Many of us serve on boards, nonprofit boards. Congressman Garcia talked about this earlier. There aren't enough board members on corporate boards. I will tell you that the word is out on the major nonprofit boards of any kind of cultural institution here in Chicago. If you like art, you like performing arts, you like ballet, you like dance, you like opera, those boards are yearning for Hispanic board members. Executives, people experience, people who are in love with the art. So if you want to find a way to connect and network with players in Chicago, find a museum or a cultural institution in Chicago, go in, call them up, find out how you can volunteer, and ultimately how can you serve on the board. And you will find the doors are open for that.
Wow. I think you will agree that we have received now some very important kind of nuggets of action items that we could really put in place and make a difference. I cannot resist just to share one of my learnings, and is that usually you think about the market and the workforce as two different things. When you connect those two, there is real power. I saw it at PepsiCo, connecting the Hispanic Employee Resource Group to the marketing brand for Mountain Dew, which was consumed 70% by Hispanics. And that combination just energized one to the other, and the story went to win 20 points market share in that brand. When you align the workforce to the strategy of the business, I believe that's when magic starts to happen. But with these thoughts, I would just like to close the panel by reminding you that you have a page in your folders that is an invitation to become ambassadors to the Hispanic Promise. And I think we have heard that there are several ways in which we can connect with CEOs and corporate executives and invite them to join. So I would really encourage you to become ambassadors for all of this. And I would like to close by thanking all of you. You have been incredible, and I enjoy your friendship too. Thank you.
If I may, don't go panel, if you don't mind, just like sit for a second. I want to personally thank you for being in this panel because it's sending a signal. And I know, and I've been dealing with a number of organizations and CEOs that don't want to expose themselves until they are already at the destination. And I know it takes courage, but sending a signal to us as a Hispanic community that you're not there yet, but you're ready to take the promise to start the journey. And that is something that we value. So thank you so much. And this is important because in all America, there are like dozens of corporate pledges, but none for Hispanics. So it is a great deal to have you as our first ever panel on the Hispanic Promise and start talking. Our community works really hard, but we don't bite and we don't know how to bark. So we're coming from the last point to trying to catch up to a number of other communities that we have to learn from women to African American. So having actually leadership, knowing that that diversity, let alone diversity, inclusion is key for your business. That is 70% of the workforce. That in an area of like young people willing to see which of these companies do I work for. Well, if I'm Hispanic, I want to see who is Hispanic friendly. So making that commitment and sending that signal is key. And today we announced that there were 50 companies that joined, and I hope that tomorrow we can say it's 100. So thank you so much for this panel. Thank you so much. And this is, there we go, thank you. We're coming to the end. I do recognize that we did not have even pee-pee breaks in the entire day, that we got you actually glued to your table, but we knew that the content of the panels are so powerful, and it's so incredible to see the quality of the panelists and the insights that we have. And on the last panel, I do want to you all to stay here. We're gonna summarize and we're gonna get the key learnings from our rapporteurs. So please welcome our last panel. Our rapporteurs joined by, please join the panel. And we're gonna hear actually from the rapporteurs on everything that we have heard from education, financial empowerment, and the change the change to improve perception. Thank you so much.
Claudia, congratulations. I think this is, when I think about where we first started this journey with each other, and we are all human, and to now stand here today and talk about 50 companies and 12 organizations backing this Hispanic Promise, we've come a long way. Thank you, Richard, for recognizing me. Yes, this is my third week at the Zeno Group after 20 years in Fortune 100 corporate America and a decade in the news business, and I appreciate your comment about recruiting from above, because it reminded me of a conversation. Here's a little tip. If you work with somebody and it's their last day in the office, it's the best day to ask them for advice, because on the way out the door they'll tell you just about anything, right? And I remember talking to a gentleman who ran HR at Ford Motor Company, very successful African American corporate executive who went on to lead HR at Chevron, and he said, you need to know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. Everybody know the difference? And sadly, I wish I had learned that in my 20s, but he was telling me this in my 40s, and I tried to practice it in my 50s, and it's really important, because I think that's what this promise is about sponsoring all of us. The other thing too is, I've had the good fortune of working with several, really well-known CEOs in corporate America, and one day it dawned on me, in addition to all of them being fine gentlemen, Anglo-Saxon gentlemen, white Caucasian gentlemen, they were all first-time CEOs. None of them had ever been a CEO before. And so it seemed to me that also underscored to me the role that sponsorship plays, and sometimes the leap of faith we all have to take in each other to say, yeah, you know what? I'm backing you. And in a similar way, thank you, Richard, for sponsoring me and taking a leap of faith on me. And I think the leap of faith we're asking corporate America to take on what is a rich, diverse America that we need to begin to embrace and really bring into the mainstream. So anyway, so some key takeaways overarching, and then we'll go to our panelists. I mean, I think we all agree on the need to unify. That is clear. That has been a core part of the We Are All Human mandate, and something Claudia has been driving dating back to the first summit at the United Nations in December. I think secondly, and it's evidenced in the voting and in the research that the Zeno Group has done in conjunction with We Are All Human, that there are really three priorities that we're rallying around: access to education, financial empowerment, and this yearning really to enhance our image today as a broader community. And then I think somebody said today, from our entrepreneur panel, we always have to be developing business. I mean, it's not a 9-to-5 job, it's full time. And I would add to that, I think we have to constantly be telling our story. Our community story. We get, on the clock, off the clock, with each other, because even we can't afford to be ignorant about our own story, but also with the folks outside of our community. So those are probably some of the key takeaways I would take away. But Andres, you want to kick off your observations? You're going to focus on the topic of education.
Yes, and the first lesson of education was, are we Hispanic or are we Latino? And I think the comment was, we're Hispanic 9 to 5, but at 5 p.m. we become Latino. So keep that in mind. But the panel did talk about the journey of education and the process between high school, college, and then the corporate life. And we must also remember, a lot of minds and ideas are formed even before then in middle school. We do know that through particularly women's programs in technology. Hitting those kids at the middle school level really makes an impact in that process. So let's keep that in mind. A couple of key things that we learned from that process was those high schools are pushing kids in two different directions now within our community, college and vocational schools. And not always the traditional four-year schools, but the 2-year or sometimes the 4-year community colleges. And they're getting creative about handling our community, from fellowships, internships, apprenticeships, and using wraparound programs, and really working hard to remove that stigma from those community colleges. I myself just joined a community college board this past week to really help get that Hispanic voice in there. I highly recommend you do that as well. A key thing that they're doing, a lot of corporations are getting involved is in the mentorships, and is also getting involved in the Hispanic incubators. There's a spectacular one here, obviously here in Chicago, of 1871. I'm from Detroit, and we're very envious of what a great program that is, and that's something that keep getting engaged. And the key thing with corporate engagement is very focused on these public-private partnerships. A lot of the reality is we want to be involved because we want dibs on those students. We do have a workforce shortage, so we do want to get involved. We want to expose that brand and get that brand experience. One of the things that was also said was about making sure you give kids exposure, the ability to explore, and make sure it's the platform you're giving them so the kids can get educated. And that ecosystem as a whole needs to work together. And in finishing, one of the panelists talked about, music and athletics was the way to get out of the neighborhood, the whole rock and jock syndrome. But now, through technology, each of these kids now has an opportunity to be an entrepreneur. So let's encouraging them, and let's make sure we're educating them.
Paula? You got it.
Sorry, I hate to speak in public.
Well,
I'm a behind-the-scenes person.
And I mean, Paul, you're going to talk about perception change, the image issue, right?
Imagine that. Well, thank you, and thank you, Claudia. This has been an amazing event. I'm so grateful to be here. I think the biggest thing the biggest theme for the panel on changing perceptions, it's gatekeepers. And it's, from the media, we had someone who works in advertising to corporate to nonprofits. It's really about having internal advocates who will set up the stage from which Latinos can stand and be proud through inclusiveness and tell their story. And eventually, as someone on the panel alluded to, we will stop being a token Latino, and we will start becoming a part of the fabric. So I come from advertising myself, and it's always the ad of, well, let's get someone that looks Pan-Asian, Well, what if we stop thinking that way? Also coaching for leaders, and someone talked about, and it was Renato Fernandez, talked about, advertising, it's a white man's game. I would disagree a little bit with that because there are some great multicultural agencies out there, Latino-led multicultural agencies, but I get what he's saying. What he's saying is really bring a voice of diversity to the C-suite, especially because you have a lot of companies that have been bought out by bigger. So you have WPP who bought out Bravo Group and all that. So they're still being led by very Anglo, leadership. And I would just add to that also on the client side, oftentimes you have clients, you have agencies who are talking to clients and trying to bring diversity to the table, but the clients are pushing back. So that is a challenge. Also talking about the media. Those who work at the media, in media outlets, play a very, very critical role, not just Latino media, but also general market media. And, the panel touched on this new world that we live in, because it's not just traditional media anymore. It's not television, radio. We now live in a world where each one of us is a media source. We all can generate content that sometimes when it goes viral, it takes on a whole life of its own. You have influencers who have more power than a Super Bowl ad. So these gatekeepers are really giving the platform for Latinas who are helping in their community, or the small business owner in El Monte, California. People, everyday people who are out there making a difference in their communities, but really don't have a voice. So the media is really bringing those stories to light. And to summarize, I would just say that every single one of the 54 million Latinos in this country play a role as influencers and storytellers. Also, in dispelling the negative perceptions that exist about Latinos. And why? So thank goodness for Google, right? We love it. If Latino GDP was a country, by the way, Latino GDP is 2.13 trillion. If it was a country, it would be the 7th largest country in the world. So we have the numbers.
We certainly do.
To get the respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And Rodrigo, you're going to give us the key takeaways on financial empowerment from today.
Yes, I will. And I'm going to be very brief. Very simple. 3 items. First, we have to build mobility. And that can be done. Education, employment, entrepreneurship can provide pathways to financial and economic capital. Number 2, building equity and wealth. That means access to capital. Well, how do we do that? That is A, home ownership through business loans and venture capital. As we've noted earlier, only 1% goes to Latino founders. Through home ownership rates, obviously through home loans. Degree and vocational education, that's done through student loans. And then obviously through financial literacy and understanding the complexities of 401ks and IRAs, college savings plans and ABLE investment plans and credit cards and insurance and taxes and loans. And number 3 is through building representation. We have approximately 18% of the US population, but yet when we're looking at corporate board diversity, only 1.8% of the Russell 3000 directors are Latinos. And it gets even worse if you're talking about Latinas. It's less than 0.5%. Or we're talking about the C-suite. Only 10 to 12 CEOs in the Fortune 500 are Latinos. That's 2% approximately. Or when we're talking about STEM, which is the future of this country, 8 to 9% of the professional STEM workforce is Latino. So how do we do this? We need to create the opportunities, or how some say, you have to be in the room when it happens. We need to influence the decision makers and those with capital, and we need to change the perception and the Latino narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. So these are the takeaways from your rapporteurs, and now Claudia will close out.
Thank you. So that's a wrap. Thank you so much. I just want to recognize the incredible amount of knowledge and quality of the speakers, and incredible thank you for the sponsors, for the advisory board members. I'm going to call on the co-host in a second, but I want to give a special recognition to the team of World Human that put together this event. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, just like recognizing Michelle, Liz, Mariana, Andrea, Marina, all of the people that you've been in contact with. Well, this is a wrap, and we have only 2 votes to go. So before I call on the co-host to give the closing words and pieces of wisdom to take away, here it is. We've been talking about the Hispanic Promise. Now it is time for you to make a promise. And we're going to take your devices, your mobile phone devices, for you to answer. This is a cloud question, so we're going to just see. I want you to answer what are you promising in a word. So it could be content, it could be sharing, it could be, like becoming an ambassador. So I want to make sure that all of you have a word that is going to start. All right, so we're going to create more content. We're going to give ourselves 5 more seconds to make the promise. What promise are we making to our community? We're here today. We've heard a number of companies. We've heard a number of ideas. So what is your promise? All right, commitment, storytelling, sharing, hiring, involved, ambassador. Yes, I like the ambassador. We have an ambassador program at the World Human Foundation, and everything is live streamed. So if you go to our website, you will see all the content all the time. Yes, I'm liking this leadership content exposure, mentor, ambassador. And I think that with this, well, you keep on actually bringing the ideas that you make a promise yourself. I'm going to ask the people that made this happen today, and that is Richard Inman and Jose Luis Prado. Please come to close this summit.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Richard. I am going to be very brief. Is it working? Yeah. Hello. I'm going to be very brief. I really hope that you found the whole session as inspiring as it was to me. I think the caliber of the leadership and wisdom that we had in the room was very relevant. And I think we not only discussed the problems, but importantly, we discussed the action plan. And I think all of us can take some of the advice that we received today and the wisdom we saw and apply it to our own game plan. And I think that's going to be powerful. I invite you to stay connected because this event is going to be taken to other cities, and this will feed the framework into the action plan that different regions will put together. So there will be a very useful piece there that can guide your action. And hopefully you will feel very compelled to continue elevating the efforts that you already make and that make this community so special. Thank you for opening your time so generously today. Thank you.
For me, I actually want to say something about Claudia. Because she's my wife, first of all, but also because, literally 18 months ago, she decided to take a leave from the UN and to set out to do this, and to have actually gotten an organization together to get 50 companies to sign on, to have this idea of the Hispanic Promise, to have this vision of bringing together 26 nationalities, and to do it in a selfless and incredibly hardworking way. I can attest to this, 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., getting up, doing stuff until 10:30 or 11 at night, working on copy. And, this is a startup, and she's made it happen, and it's really the promise of Hispanics in America because, she didn't know how to run a business, and she has gotten people to join and donate time and husband and others to do things that, normally we just, don't do. And that's because we want her to succeed. And so I hope you all join her, as Jose Luis and I have, because of force of personality or mission or whatever it is it takes. But the objective is so noble, and I think both of us salute you for what you've achieved. And it's just the beginning. That's the point. We need all of you to do the Hispanic Promise. So, bravo, Claudia.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. All right. I want to close with one last vote. And this is a physical expression of your vote. And the question is, would you stand up to show your commitment to the unification of the Hispanic community? Would you stand up to show your commitment to the unification of the Hispanic community. And that is what we want to see, 100%. Thank you so much for being here with us. Let's actually get on going. Unidos, we're strong. Fragmented, we're not. So thank you so much.